Ladies and gentlemen, dear viewers, it's a really nice pleasure for me to be here at this symposium. My name is Dr. Negyesi. I'm a Hungarian-born motoring historian, publisher, and author. And this presentation will be about the Gordon Bennett Cup, which put motorsport into an international context. It was the first organized motorsport event for a lot of different nations. And a few months ago, we were in a fortunate position to learn a lot about this race. And I would like to share some of the things which we learned. Some of you may know that I'm the editor and publisher of Rare and Unique Vehicles, which is a quarterly automotive history magazine, which won the Richard Brigham Award from the Society of Automotive Historians last year. And if you like interesting stories, this is the magazine for you. We have a Christmas offer for €100 plus shipping. You can get every edition, and that's basically my self-promotion for this presentation. We cooperate with museums and collectors from time to time. Last year, we published a book on the history of the Paris-Vienna race, which happened in 1902, which we did together with the Metropole Druten collection in the Netherlands. And that's when I learned a lot about early motorsport. And what I learned, thanks to Thomas Ulrich, who was the author of the book, is that a lot of resources, a lot of books and essays which have been published are not so reliable. So when Dieter Dressel, owner of the Central Garage Museum in Germany, Bad Homburg, approached us with this idea that in 2024, it will be 120 years since the 1904 Gordon Bennett race started from Bad Homburg. There should be a book, there should be a website. So we put together a website, and in the process, we have acquired a lot of photos, a lot of interesting materials, some which I will show. A little bit about Mr. Dressel, who's an extremely nice private collector, and because of the 1904 Gordon Bennett Cup, he amassed a huge collection of materials related to the event, which he was kind enough to share with us. And the Central Garage Museum, which was opened in 2007 in place of a Opel dealership in Bad Homburg, hosts very nice temporary exhibitions. The last one, which is in this slide, is about 120 years of Harley Davidson, but the museum featured various very interesting exhibitions. And Mr. Dressel was the president of the German Mercedes-Benz Compressor Club until this year when he retired. And he has a very nice private collection of very exciting vehicles like the Maikäfer prototype from Josef Ganz, and he's restoring the Schlörwagen, which was a Mercedes-based streamlined German car from the 1930s. So together we built the Gordon Bennett Cup website, gordonbennettcup.racing, which features a lot of photos, some of those which have not been published before, biography of the racers, short introduction to the cars, and a couple of other bits. We have a complete index. What's really interesting is if you look around the published resources, you can see that in many cases there are a lot of mistakes. And the mistakes are very easy to make in a race like the Gordon Bennett Cup, because in part this was part of, in many cases, of other races. So for example, in 1901 there was a Paris-Bordeaux race. The Gordon Bennett Cup was part of that. In 1902 the Paris-Vienna race and was part of that. And from 1903 and 1904 there were elimination trials. So before the race they selected who will participate. And over the years, some of these elimination trial participants morphed into real racers in the mind of some of the authors. There's a great book, there are several books on the Gordon Bennett Cup. One of the best known was written many years ago by Lord Montagu, together with Michael Sedgwick, who was the librarian at the Beauty Museum. And it's a great book. But we went back to the contemporary race reports featured in various German, English, and French magazines to try to get a complete picture of what really happened. This is a little statistics about the website, and please feel free to visit. So what is this about? What was the importance of the Gordon Bennett Cup? And why is it relevant today? Because it is still relevant today. The origins of the Gordon Bennett Cup go back to 1899, when Alexander Winton, who was the biggest manufacturer of motor cars in America at the time, decided to challenge the French manufacturers, claiming that his cars would beat any French cars over a distance of 1,000 miles. And his call was heard, and one of the French racers, Fernand Charon, accepted the challenge and deposited 2,000 francs with the Paris office of the New York Herald. The New York Herald was a very well-known daily, which was owned by James Gordon Bennett Jr., who was a very well-known playboy, sportsman, and newspaperman. He took over from his father in the 1860s. He was the one who sent Henry Stanley to find Dr. David Livingstone in darkest Africa. In 1887, he set up the European version of the New York Herald. And he was also a technological innovator, introducing new techniques to French and European media. And he was also creating news, making news through the promotion of new sports and competitions. He constantly sought new ways of speeding up news gathering and news distribution on an international scale. This race between Winton and Charon never took place, but it gave Gordon Bennett an idea that there should be a race, after all, between the great nations. And you have to remember that this was the time when national identities were forged, in many cases, through wars. So this was a more calm and restrained way to share and highlight national identity. But as is often the case, some people took it too far, like Wilhelm II, the German emperor, who went out of his way to make the 1904 event extremely spectacular. He spent 95,000 Reichsmark, which is about 340,000 euros, on the grandstand alone for 1904. So Gordon Bennett set up an international cup, commissioned a very well-known French jeweler, Andrei Aukok, to design this beautiful cup, which is today in the offices, the Paris offices of the Automobile Club, the French Automobile Club. And it shows a racing panhard steered by the genius of progress with the goddess of victory upright upon the seat. The first one was hosted in 1900, and every nation were allocated a color which their representatives' cars would be painted. These were blue for France, yellow for Belgium, white for Germany, and red for the United States of America. Later on, Great Britain received green, Italy black, Austria black and yellow, and Switzerland red and yellow. There were several stipulations regarding the race. Its distance would be not less than 550 and not more than 650 kilometers. The cost of race organization was divided amongst the participating clubs. One of the most important aspects of the criteria was that the entrants and drivers representing a national club had to be members of that club, but the cars themselves had to be made in their entirety in the country whose colors they wore. And every nation was able to nominate 3 vehicles. Naturally, this gave a certain edge to smaller countries where 1 or 2 manufacturers vied for attention, while in France, this gave way to a lot of headaches and debates on who should participate, and eventually led to the elimination trials. And back then, curbing the rules and circumventing the rules was not alien to racers. So Mercedes found, let's say, a loophole, and they were able to nominate 6 cars because 3 cars were made in Germany and 3 cars were made by the Daimler subsidiary in Austria, which was later known as Austro-Daimler. This slide shows the 1903 race, the Gordon Bennett Cup, which was held in Ireland. And by that time, city-to-city races were cancelled. First, the city-to-city races, which started with the 1894 Paris-Rouen Tour. This included some of these, as I mentioned previously, the Gordon Bennett Cup, but as cars became much faster, the road conditions were still dire, so lots of dust. There were passers-by, there were sometimes cars went onto the roads unexpectedly. And at the 1903 Paris-Madrid race, there were a lot of accidents and deadly accidents, and Marcel Renault and others unfortunately died, which led eventually to track racing. And this was the first time that they tried to close down the roads and designated a track, a closed track for a race. And this is the 1904 race, the grandstand of the German race. Here, 2,500 spectators were able to sit. Below the rows of seats there was a restaurant, a post office, press rooms, fire station, souvenir shops, and so on. The first race was held in 1904, the last one in 1905, and in that just these 5 years, motorsports changed tremendously. There were so many car manufacturers and who wanted to participate, that even the elimination trials were not enough. So after 1905, they switched to another type of racing. But what kind of cars race there? You have to remember that the turn of the century, Camille Janazzi, a Belgian-born racer who had a duel with a French guy, Gaston de Chasseloup-Laubat, and they started from 60 kilometers per hour, and by 1899, the land speed record was raised to 100 kilometers per hour. So these cars, which you see here and which they look quite very simple, and artillery wheels and everything, but for example, the Panhard already had a steering wheel and they had chain drive and everything. They were capable of 160 kilometers per hour speed, and they had these enormous engines. So this was not a very safe sport. The cars, just some of the examples here, for example, the Panhard and Levasseur was one of the first which featured steering wheel, and later they produced an engine with where the cylinders were cast individually. Previously, they were cast in pairs. And by the 1902 race, the engine power was increased to a claimed 50 horsepower, but in reality it was closer to 70 horsepower. And if you look at the Morse, which was the competitor of Panhard in France, they did not do very well at the Gordon Bennett race. Actually, this is a very interesting one. It's called the Dolphin. This is from 1903. It also had a 70 horsepower engine and a kind of a streamlined body. Its bonnet was shaped like an inverted ship's bow leading into a fairing. It was also recognized that there is air streaming along the underside of the car, so at least the gearbox was covered by a fairing. Beneath the 100-liter petrol tank, there was also a water tank. And both Panhard and Levasseur and Morse did not race after 1903. One of the best known British entrants, which actually won the 1902 Gordon Bennett Cup, was Napier, and this is the actual car which won the 1902 Paris-Vienna, sorry, the 1902 Gordon Bennett Cup, which was part of the Paris-Vienna race. And it was driven by Edge, who was a dealer, but also a marketing man. And this had a 6.4 liter engine with 45 horsepower. Each cylinder had 4 automatic intake valves. The radiator was extra large and made by a company that normally produced steam-powered buses. It had a 180-liter petrol tank, and it weighed 933 kilos. And it was the first, it is claimed that it was the first British racing car to be painted British racing green. And because of this is a presentation, there are a lot of stories which can be told, and lots of great stories which you can read on the website. This is just a short overview. Naturally, Mercedes was at the forefront of racing, and they prepared and made a lot of effort for the Gordon Bennett Cup. And unfortunately, they managed to only win once, the 1903 race in Ireland, where Camille Jenatzy managed to win. And this was part of the Mercedes Simplex family. Another interesting fact of these early racers is that in many cases, the body was interchangeable. So you had a touring body, which was replaced with a much simpler body for the race. But afterwards, in many cases, this was converted back to a touring car and sold off as such. And this car was powered by a 66 kilowatt 90 horsepower engine. And the problem was that a fire destroyed most of the works in June 1903. And eventually less powerful cars were entered, and Camille Jenatzy won the 1903 race with an average speed of 97.2 kilometers per hour, which is quite impressive. And this is one of the most interesting cars of the whole race, because this was previously not very known. The brand Richard Brazier, Henry Brazier and Max Brazier built some cars, but these were not very well known. But in 1904, they came, they saw and conquered, and repeated the feat in 1905 with this car. It had a pressed steel chassis frame and steel chain drive, while smaller models already adapted shaft drive, but this one had chain drive. And as there was a 1,000 kilo weight limit, they tried to adhere to that, and this car weighed 972 kilos. And this was the only car in the 1904 race which had an engine smaller than 10 liters, 9.9 liters actually. And it was taken from a motorboat, and it had a maximum horsepower of 85. Who raced these cars? These were sometimes factory drivers, sometimes foremen, sometimes wealthy aristocrats, sometimes the designers and builders of the vehicles themselves. Pictured is the Red Devil, Camille Jenatzy himself, who was born to a wealthy family in Belgium. Most of the early successful racers came from Belgium for some reason. And he was fearless and very daring, and gave Mercedes the first international win. Here's a picture of Mr. Edge, who was born in Australia, but then came back to the UK, where his family lived. And just like many others, he started as a bicycle racer, then switched to cars. And he won the 1905 Gordon Bennett race. The only small wrinkle in that saying that he won the race is that actually the 1902 Gordon Bennett Cup was finished by only one person, he. And after the 1903 Gordon Bennett race, he went into more long distance record racing. This is the guy who won the 1904 and the 1905 races, Leon Terry, who was nicknamed Le Chronometer because no one else could drive as fast so consistently. And 1904 was the first year for him with Richard Brazier. He won 1904, 1905 Gordon Bennett Cup. And then he tried to beat his own race car without success. Then returned to Richard Brazier, then unfortunately he died of an illness in 1909. This is a very interesting picture from 1905, the last Gordon Bennett Cup. You can see the fences on the track. So this was a closed track, and actually this was the forerunner of the Grand Prix races, which started in 1906 with the French Grand Prix. And I'm very proud to say that the first Grand Prix in France was won by a guy, Ferencis, who was of Hungarian origin. Thank you very much for your attention. You can see my email address, but also there's a link below the presentation where you can send your questions, which I will be very happy to answer. Thank you.